Every once in a while I ask everybody, I go, what would you like for a sermon? Last year, Heather said, I want one on Esther. I ignored her for a whole year, hoping she would forget about Esther. Didn't happen. She brought it up again. I would like to have one on Esther again. Okay, so I did my research on Esther. First of all, before I get started, Esther, Queen Esther, as she became, was probably one of the sweetest ladies that I know about. She didn't do anything wrong, basically. And I thought I would go through the book of Esther, and I read it, and read it, and read it, and I would just pick out certain verses and read them. And the more I read it, the more I struggled with that, because almost every verse was really important to me. But I got to give you a background first. Xerxes, I'm going to call it Xerxes. Now, all these names are real goofy, so we're not pronouncing them correctly, and you know that I'm not going to pronounce them correctly. But King Xerxes was the king back then when this happened. And I got to tell you, we are talking about a king born in Iran. Okay? So you know what the lifestyle was in Iran. You know the ladies, women were nothing. Okay? And the men were the top. Xerxes was born in Iran in 519 BC, before Jesus, and he lived about 53 years old, and he was assassinated, so they killed him. When I read about Xerxes and studied him, you know, I kind of liked him. He was a man that meant what he said, but he had some problems. He was extremely wealthy, and we're going to read about that in a little bit. I mean, really wealthy. He had gold all over, and he wanted everybody to know he was wealthy. And as we read this, we're going to hear and read that he had a beautiful wife, the queen. She was drop dead gorgeous. And he wanted to brag her up too. But the difference between the first queen and the second queen, Esther was a sweetheart. And his first queen, she was on herself. Vashti was her name. Vashti. Vashti. Let's start reading. We're going to read the book of Esther. Like I said, I really didn't want to do this one, and you'll find out why when we get to it. This is what happened during the time of Xerxes. The Xerxes who ruled over 127 provinces. You got any idea how big that is? It stretched from India to Kush. That's by the Nile River. This is a huge area. At the time of King Xerxes' reign from his royal throne in the citadel of Susa, in the 3rd year of the reign, he gave a banquet for all his nobles and officials, the military leaders of Persia and Media, the princes, and the nobles of the provinces were present. This is a huge banquet. For a full 180 days, he displayed the vast wealth of his kingdom and the splendor and the glory of his majesty. Did you get that? 180 days. How many days in a year? 365. A half a year this went on. That's a big party. He wanted everybody to know he was king, he was wealthy. When these days were over, the king gave a banquet lasting 7 days in the enclosed garden of the king's palace for all the people, from the least to the greatest, who were in the citadel of Susa, the garden hanging of white and blue linen, fastened with cords of white linen and purple material to silver rings in the marble pillars. You see that? He didn't forget the simple people either. 7 days it continued. All the simple people, like me and you, were invited. Now, here's how wealthy he was. There were couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, whatever that is, marble, mother of pearl, and other costly stones. We went to the Middle East, and we were walking some of the streets, and you cannot believe what the mosaic looks like. That's little teeny stones. We're talking tiny. A whole road made of that. Sidewalks, mosaics, had to take hours and hours and hours and lots of money. That's what they were made out of. The wine was served in goblets of gold. Anybody here, how much is gold worth an ounce? Just a guess.
1,800.
$1,800. How many ounces in a goblet you gonna guess? Lots. Look how much money in just one goblet. Each one different from the other, and the royal wine was abundant, in keeping with the king's liberality. But the king's command, each guest was allowed to drink in his own way, for the king instructed all the wine stewards to serve each man what he wished. In other words, it wasn't 1 cup, you're done. As much as they wanted. So this king, he wasn't a mean king. He had money, and he knew it. Now what you're going to see as I keep reading, you're going to see where God has got his hand in everything. Stuff you wouldn't imagine would happen. So the queen, Vashti, also gave a banquet for the women in the royal palace of Xerxes. So the king's got his, and the queen's got her banquet. On the 7th day, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from the wine, he commanded the 7 eunuchs who served him, and their names are there, to bring before him Queen Vashti. You guys caught that, didn't you? I skipped them names, didn't I? She was wearing her royal crown in order to display her beauty to the people and the nobles, for she was lovely to look at. Okay, you got what's going on? The eunuchs are saying, Queen, the king wants you to come where he is so he can show off your beauty. I don't know any guy that has a beautiful wife that doesn't love to show off their wife's beauty. I don't know any. Or if you got a wife that knows how to cook, you want to show it off. So here's the king, says, go get her. Now, something I don't know if all of you know. Eunuchs, they're the men in charge of taking care of the women. Does everybody know what a eunuch is? You're gonna know. It's a man that's been fixed, okay? That's a eunuch. And I would imagine, Yeah, for real. Yeah. And I'm gonna imagine that the eunuchs were paid quite well by the kings, because they were in charge of his harem. But when the attendants delivered the king's command, King Vashti refused to come. And the king became furious, and he burned with anger. Since it was customary for the king to consult experts in the matters of the law and justice, he spoke with the wise men and understood the law, and were closest to the king, a bunch of guys. We're not going to read them either. Let's go to 15. According to the law, what must be done to the queen? He asked. She has not obeyed the command of the king. Then the eunuchs have taken to her. So what's going to be done to this lady?
She's getting kicked out.
That's exactly right. He did not kill her, but he kicked her out. She was no longer to be in the presence of the king forever. And she was stripped of her title of the queen. He did not kill her. He got rid of her. Let's go to 19. Therefore, if it pleases the king, let us ensure that a royal decree, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media, which cannot be repealed, that Vashti is never again to enter the presence of the king. Also, let the king give his royal position to someone else who is better than she. Then, when the king edict is proclaimed throughout all the vast realm, all the women will respect their husbands, from the least to the greatest. You got to remember, this is the Middle East. The women weren't that important. Let me change that. The men were in charge. So the king and his nobles were pleased with the advice, and the king did as Mushakan proposed. He sent dispatches to all of his kingdom, and each province in its own script, and to each person to its own language. This is how big this place is. There are different languages all over. Can you imagine 127 provinces? I look at Canada, just north of us. You got Manitoba, you got Ontario, Saskatchewan. Those are all provinces. Could you imagine 127 of them? This is huge. And they was proclaiming in each personal people's tongue, and every man should be ruler over his household. That means the women could not vote, just the men. Now here we go. Chapter 2. Later, when the anger of King Xerxes had subsided, when you guys get mad, how long does it take you to get over it? My wife is over it like that. Not me. I'm like Xerxes. It's going to take me a while to get over it. Finally, he got over it because, man, he is so proud of his wife. And she said, buzz off. That's exactly what she said. Buzz off. I'm busy. Didn't last long. Now she's gone. He remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. Then the personal attendant of the king proposed, hey, let's search for another beautiful young virgin for the king. The king appointed commissioners in every province of his realm to bring about beautiful girls into the harem of Citadel and Susa. You know, you guys are looking at that word, you're going, oh, it's Susa. I think the A is pronounced long, so it's Susa. We mess it up. Let them be placed under the care of Haggai, the king's eunuch. This is the main eunuch, who's in charge of the women, and let beautiful treatments be given to them. Let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. This advice appealed to the king. And he followed it. This king, he was a ruler, but you know what? He didn't rule by himself. He was always asking for assistance, wisdom from other people. Now you're going to find out where she comes from. And we're not going to get through all this today. I can see that. We're barely going to get started. Now there was a citadel of Susa, a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin, named Mordecai, son of them guys. Let's jump down. Here we go, 7th verse. Mordecai had a cousin named Hadassah. Okay? He had a cousin named Hadassah. That is Esther, same name, whom he had brought up because she had neither father or mother. In other words, she was an orphan. Esther was an orphan. So he has brought her up as his own daughter. And as we read this, listen to him. Even though she's there at the kingdom, he's never very far away. He's always at the gate. He's watching her. He's taking care of her. I would say he's even closer than a father. This girl, who was also known as Esther, was lovely in form and feature. And Mordecai had taken her as his own daughter. That's because her mom and father had died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many girls were brought there and put under the care of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai. The girl pleased him, and he won his favor. Immediately, he provided her with her beauty treatments and special food. Wait till you hear about this. She got special food and a beauty treatment. I can see my wife, granddaughters, and daughters doing this. He assigned to her 7 maids selected from the king's palace and moved her and her maids into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. They were Jews. Esther's a Jew. And you're going to find out why. This is all in God's plan. God knew that she was not to tell anybody she was a Jew. And you'll see why. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. He never left her side. Before the girl's turn came to go into King Xerxes, she had to complete 12 months of beauty treatments prescribed for the women. 6 months with oil and myrrh. 6 months with perfumes and cosmetics. 6 and 6. Can you have that much oil and cosmetics on?
Lucky girl.
Lucky guy.
I heard it. I don't know who said it, but I heard it. Wow, now I can hardly see. This is how she would go to the king. She'd be looking good and smelling good. Anything she wanted, it was given to her to take with her from the harem to the king's palace. She was spoiled. In the evening, she would go there, and in the morning return to another part of the harem, to the care of another guy, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the concubines. She would not return to the king unless he was pleased with her. And he had to summons her by name. So they all had to march in front of the king, and he picked out the one he was pleased with. When the turn came for Esther to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. Esther won the favor of everyone who saw her. She was taken to the king in the royal residence in the 10th month, the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. All this stuff, months, years, is recorded in the Bible. And if you don't think it's true, you can go to the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, and it's all in the library. All this. It's real. It happened. It's true. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head, and he made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the province. He distributed gifts with royal liberality. She won his favor. How did she do it? She did it with charm. A lot of times we try to force people to be Christians. We force our religion down their throat. And that's not always how it's done. You must set the example of what a Christian's like. Christians are different. They help people for no reason. They expect nothing in return. That's what a Christian is. And if it's real, they love to do it. They love to help other people. Esther, she's queen now. Now we're going to keep going on this. But if the king is in his palace, his throne, and you walk in there and disturb him, he can have you killed right then and there. They had tremendous power back then. And I think probably in some parts of the Far East they still do. We're going to get into that. Let's go to the 19th verse. When the virgins were assembled the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. But Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do. For she continued to follow her cousin's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. You see that? She listened. And I was thinking about men and women that are married. It seems like if you're out in public and a man says something nasty about his wife or the other way around, they get in trouble and they start hollering and they forget to think. But if you go home and you talk softly, think about what you say before you say it, the problem gets solved. I was brought up in a house that we didn't holler. I don't remember arguing. I don't remember fighting. That's kind of rare. And then I go to other houses, oh my stars. All they do is holler and scream and fight. It's not how I was brought up. I was brought up more like Esther, not like the first queen. During the time that Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, there was two guys there, two officials who guarded the doorway. They became angry, conspired to assassinate the king. Got that? Two guys that want to kill the king. Now Mordecai, he found out about the plot, and he told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king. giving credit to Mordecai. You see that? He told Esther to tell your husband that somebody's going to kill you. And then when Esther told the king, she said, it's not me. Mordecai told me about this plot. And then they reported it, and they investigated it, and they found out it was true. The two officials were hanged at the gallows. All this was recorded in the book of Annals in the presence of the king. I'm going to have to quit there because I'm out of time. But did you notice what the king did for this gentleman that reported he was going to be assassinated? He did absolutely nothing for him. He never even said, thank you for saving my life. If you want to keep reading Esther, we're going to do it next week. You're going to find out how God intervened. There was a reason that God did not let Xerxes thank him, because later he does thank him, and it's incredible. Let's finish it next week. We can get done with it next week. Is that okay? Okay. But Esther was a sweetheart. She really was.